But I will tell you, don't drink it out of cans, you gotta do it in glass.
Okay.
Because the ginger part kind of settles in the bottom of the
Okay,
can.
fair.
When you pour it, you actually start out with a light liquid and then dark ginger.
Well, I like that because it tells me that the ginger's real.
So pour it in glass. So see what I'm talking about?
Okay. Fair. I will do that. Yes, sir. I'm on my way. You're right.
Yeah.
Up the hip,
Yeah.
get ready, get started.
Tom, we've already done the call to order and pledge of allegiance,
Yes.
official opening.
Yeah. Yeah, we've done all that. And that's Sarah, right? Let's see. So we have, first of all, welcome you all that's in attendance, and we're glad to see you. And the first item on the agenda will be Mrs. Henderson, our Commissioner of Revenue. So, Ms. Henderson, come on up.
I don't really have anything to present.
Uh-huh.
So Mr. Hogan had inquired several months ago, I guess, with my chief deputy about the new farm use place cards that will go into effect July 1 of 2023. And do you want to say what your concern was about it? You want to do that first?
So we talked, and the farm use exemption from vehicle registration is going away. You know, where folks can no longer just spray paint farm use on the back of their tailgate or get one of those farm use tags from Tractor Supply or whatever. As of July 1, 2023, that's illegal. No more of that. They have to go to DMV. If they're going to operate it on the highway, they have to go to DMV and get a farm vehicle placard. It's going to look just like a license plate, but they're not calling it a license plate. It'll have numbers, alphanumeric digits on it that they can associate back to that vehicle. It'll be a permanent placard assigned to that vehicle. The farmer has to pay a one-time $15 fee, and he has to apply for it. And he has to prove he's a farmer. He has to prove he has insurance on it, and he has to prove ownership. So the thought that came to mind, okay, if DMV is now going to know about these vehicles, is that going to show up on the commissioner's downloads for property tax purposes? And nobody really knew the answer to that. We started digging and talking to, Sarah talked to her commissioners group, and I spoke with someone from Delegate Ferris's office, excuse me, and they contacted DMV asking that question, and their answer was yes, that those, since DMV is not going to have those vehicles in their system, even though they're not technically registered, because they don't get a license plate, they get a farm use placard that looks just like a license plate. But since it's in their system, the commissioners are going to get all those vehicles when they get the downloads.
And we would potentially assess that.
So now, potentially, all those farm vehicles that are truly farm vehicles are going to wind up on her tax rolls. And if you've got a cattle trailer that you use twice a year to haul cattle to the market, or if you've got a truck that you use once a year to haul tobacco someplace, that's now gonna show up on her tax tickets, and they're gonna get taxed on those, under our current county ordinance. Only way to fix that I'm aware of might be to amend that ordinance. So that's kind of where the conversation was going, to keep from taxing these vehicles that are not currently taxed. Would not affect the vehicles that already have a farm vehicle license plate, which is a totally different animal. They're already registered, they're already taxed. We don't want to affect those, but we also don't want to pick up, the cattle trailer, any new ones, the cattle trailers and the
vehicles as
the
well.
vehicles, the old pickups and the things, or it could be a road tractor that they use to haul, their crops to market, a couple times a year. Just trying to try to get ahead of the curve, because when this hits when those tax tickets start coming out and everybody starts getting all those vehicles taxed, they're gonna start calling.
One thing that I don't know that Bill and I talked about this, but so the law goes into effect July 1 of 2023. But they have already started selling those placard cards. They started those the end of September, 1st of October. So potentially we could already have some vehicles that might come on our downloads from that point on with that placard, and we would automatically pick them up if they still have it as January 1. So that is the main concern right now if somebody has already gotten it. It's probably not many because they have till July 1 to be compliant. So that's the big question is, do y'all want to do something for the ones who have already started getting them? And it shows up January 1 of 2023. And I'm here if y'all have any questions as far as, I do not know, because we're not assessing them, I cannot tell you how many's out there that we're not assessing, because we're not assessing them. I do have the number for the ones that he was talking about, as far as the ones that already have a regular farm vehicle registration. We are taxing them, and we're getting the license fee on them. Now, the license fee on those are reduced from the $35 because you can't charge any more than what the registration is, and those registrations are lower. So the tax amount for the vehicles, for those farm vehicles, is $15,958. So you certainly, I wouldn't think, I'm not putting words in y'all's mouth, but I wouldn't think you would want to start exempting those when we're already taxing those. We're only talking about the ones who went to Tractor Supply and picked up that farm use tag, which we're not assessing now anyway.
And my hope would be that, and this is the reason for the legislation to begin with, is all those people who are abusing the current farm use system, a lot of them will not be eligible for the farm use placard. So those vehicles will get taxed because they're gonna have to go put tags on them if they're gonna drive them on the road. And then she'll find out about them and,
Assess them. Right.
they'll have to just pay like everybody else pays. But I'm worried about the true farmer, who's got 4 or 5 vehicles, but he only uses them once or twice a year for certain purposes. And all of a sudden, he gets a bunch of tax tickets for those, and that goes to his profit he made, last year.
Mr. Hope.
Mr. Carter, I've got a question for Sarah. Do you have any idea how DMV is going to identify those vehicles on the download that comes to you? Is there going to be a way that you can identify them? Do you know of yet?
I don't know at this point. We just found out that they're going to come on the download. So I would assume that they would have a different code, but I don't know that. I don't know.
Because that would be one way that make your job easier if we were to accept them,
Right.
let's say, or even if they were on a separate list,
Yeah.
which to me would make sense. But
And those, and most of the time when they come in, I mean, we have vehicles that'll come in on, just regular vehicles that will come in on our download as unlicensed, and they're not unlicensed. So it's not reliable. We have to go in and look at it in DMV. Now, of course, when we go into DMV, we should be able to tell, because I would assume it's gonna be something different in the system, because when a state trooper pulls someone over, then he has the means to go into DMV and check it. So I would assume that it would be some identifier in that.
Because I agree with Mr. Hogan. I'm tired of pulling in Kroger's parking lot and seeing this late model SUV, shiny, bright, not a speck of dirt on it and a farm tag.
Amen, me too.
And contrary to what everybody thinks, that is not the reason that this legislature was put in. There was a problem with insurance. Apparently there was some accident somewhere, I don't know where, and a vehicle didn't have insurance on it. And then the insurance companies went to the General Assembly and asked for this because that is going to be one of the requirements. They have to have insurance on
All right.
it. I was told that by DMV, so.
Fixing our code is easy if you want, if the board tells me to get a draft ordinance together, I'm glad to do so. We already have a list of farm equipment that's exempt and under state code. We can just simply add farm vehicles to that list if we want.
I think it's a great idea.
I'll draft something up and we'll get the process rolling.
Beautiful.
I think we just need to make sure it's only those farm vehicles that would qualify for the new placard,
Yeah.
not the ones that already got a tag on them.
Well, the state code that we use to exempt certain farm animals and farm implements is actually specifically identifies those as the vehicles we can exempt, so. All we gotta do is pull the language straight from the state code, and it limits it to those that are can apply for a placard. So I'll work on it and get it to the board.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Y'all
Any-
done good.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you.
Thank
for
you all
coming.
for
Thank you, Mr.
considering
Hogan,
it.
For going in depth on it.
Thanks.
Question for the attorney. Would this code amendment take place at the December meeting prior to January 1, or?
You have to advertise, I mean, I can put it together in short order, but, there's no real reason to rush it. It doesn't take effect, if Ms. Henderson's correct, if some people have applied, they'll come back and ask for a refund. They'd have to pay their taxes. So I don't think that's gonna happen between now and January.
I doubt that there's many who
Nobody's rushing to do
have got the new tags yet. Yeah.
So I'll prepare it, maybe we can put it on the December agenda for discussion maybe, and then advertise it for January.
That sounds good.
Does that work for you?
I omitted one thing, and let me retract, go back, put it in reverse, citizen public comment period. Is anybody here signed up? None. Excuse me. Okay, moving on. The school supplemental appropriation request. Attached for the board's review and approvals is a letter from Dr. Annette Bennett, superintendent requesting appropriation of federal grant funding of the amount of $56,835. Consider school's request to appropriate $56,835. There's no new local funds required. Floor is open for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the supplemental appropriate request in the amount of $56,835.
Motion made, is that second?
Second.
Discussion? We'll have a roll call vote. Reverend Jones? Mr. Hinkle?
Aye.
Mr. Hogan?
Aye.
I vote aye.
Mr. Hips.
Hips, oh, excuse me, Mr. Hips.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hips needs to identify where he's calling from.
Yeah.
That needs to be in our minutes, so.
Did you hear that?
Identify
Uh-huh,
Yes.
Yeah, 6983 State Road in Concord.
Okay.
okay. Second item is school resource officer grant. Sheriff Simpson appeared for the board at October meeting to update the board on grant funding for a school resource officer. The board requested that the sheriff and county administrators discuss the terms of the grant and update the board at the November meeting. Attached for our review is a fact sheet that Sheriff Simpson compiled and discussed with the county administrator. After discussion, both parties agreed that the limitations and minimal funding of the grant may not be the best direction to pursue at this time. Also, the sheriff is staffing 4 full-time and 2 part-time resource officer positions in the schools. Both Dr. Bennett and the sheriff feels as this situation is currently sufficient. So, Ms. Adams, would you like to respond some on that?
You have a fact sheet in your booklet and also emailed that to you as well, and it talks about the grant. It would only be a 9-month position grant, and the county would have to fund the other 3 months. It's basically a supplement to that position. And so he felt like that it really wasn't going to be advantageous because of some of the requirements of what type of officer he would have to hire as well. And, he said that may be something that he would want to address at a later date. But right now, he felt like with the 2 part-time in addition to the 4 full-time, that the schools were
Covered.
sufficiently staffed.
Okay, so we don't need to do
Yeah.
anything.
You don't need to take any action, although he said anytime that you want to approve additional positions, he'll take them.
Can't imagine him making a statement.
I know.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having the meeting and y'all coming up with the decision that you did. Next is ARPA projects. Attached for the board's review is a list of ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, that has been suggested by staff and meets the eligibility criteria. Excuse me. The projects that have been approved by the committee are highlighted in blue. The other 3 projects were projects that staff identified that could meet eligibility criteria if approved by the committee board. And you have that in your packet. Any discussion on that? You have anything on that, Ms. Adams, that you'd like to stress or?
I'll speak to it, and also Ms. Marshall compiled this list, so she may want to add something in addition to my comments. Basically, the ARPA funding criteria had more restrictions attached to it than the CARES funding did, and we have broad categories that we have to fit these projects into. And it looked at infrastructure, water, sewer infrastructure, HVAC, creating outdoor space, broadband, and mental health. So we kind of looked at some of the options in tourism. I think they were the top categories. And we looked at projects that the counties kind of had on the back burner for years and thought, okay, we feel like these are good projects and we feel like they're needed in the community. And we've put some estimated numbers there. That's not anything in stone. That's what, some of it says in discussion only. That means right now we're not sure what that definitive price would be. But we tried to find something that would fit into the model of what the ARPA funds requirements say that we have to spend them on. Do you want to add anything to that?
I think you
Yeah.
pretty much covered it, but I'm available to answer any questions if there are any specific questions that you have about any of the projects on the list.
Mr. Carter, or
Mr. Hinkle?
you got a Mr. Hogan? In reading this week's Times Virginian and the possible need for Pamplin to have 50K for a parking lot for the High Bridge Trail, I was questioning whether or not this trail at Sports Complex and some of this other stuff, if they, that money couldn't, because the parking lot would be in support of tourism and support of trails and whatnot, if maybe we couldn't use some of that money to assist the city of Pamplin in their need for that parking lot. That just came to my mind.
Okay.
And I see the mayor's back there shaking her head and doing handstands.
Okay, we can, in our next committee meeting,
Discuss that.
discuss that, yes.
And we probably, like Mr. Hinkle said, we've allowed some extra in that trail expansion
Yeah,
line.
yeah.
So it's a good possibility that it could fit into that. We have to look at that. If you'll notice, Ms. Marshall put in sections 2.18, then that defines the criteria that will fit into those categories.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hogan.
I was just gonna point out that, some of these things, you know, the biggest hit, is the 1.1 million, and that's what the board has already agreed to, on the broadband, countywide broadband project with, Firefly, and helping to get internet to every home in the county. And then like the sheriff's department bonuses, some of that, so some of these things have already been approved by the board. But I think it's good to see all of it together, so you'll know kind of in a sum total where all of this money's going. So we don't have as much as you would think to spend, but, it doesn't take long to spend it.
Very true. Very true. Any other discussion on this subject?
Mr. Carter, I would ask if the board would consider approving these as potential ARPA projects and authorize staff to move forward with the pricing and some of the details. We have to have this documented in the minutes for when they come to perform an audit.
Okay.
You know, and of course, we would come back to the board when everything's finalized and we kind of know what those dollar figures are and would ask for that money to be appropriated for that purpose.
So you're talking, just speaking of the ones in blue.
Yes, and then the committee can discuss the ones and the three below that we've identified that could fit into that criteria.
Okay, any discussion on those items that are listed in blue? If not, then is there a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we approve the list of ARPA projects as presented by the committee so that the staff can move on them.
And second, discussion? We'll have a roll call vote. Reverend Jones? Aye. Mr. Hinkle?
Aye.
Mr. Hogan?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Thank you, Ms. Adams. Oh, Mr. Hips.
Aye. I forgive you.
Thank you, Mr. Hips.
Put a beard on that phone.
Yeah. Oh, my. Next is radio communication feasibility study. At the August 15th, 2022 meeting, Supervisor Hogan updated the board on the Public Safety Committee's recommendation to proceed with a feasibility study of the current emergency communication system. Please advise staff if wireless phones, new project appropriations funds for the capital improvement fund is to be used to pay CTA consultants, liquidated for assessment services. Now, the county received $3,500 invoice from CTA to pay towards a contractual amount of $123,450 for the radio feasibility study. Please advise staff whether the invoice should be expended, out of the wireless fund, balance $555,617.45, capital project fund, or a new project appropriation of funds for this invoice. Discussion on this,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hogan.
So, we may need those funds in the wireless fund to actually pay for the radio system, when the time comes. What do we have projected to come out of the capital projects fund, capital improvement fund for this budget year?
We have not identified what projects would be spent out of it. We've got several projects on the table, such as the courthouse renovation. I think Jeff has identified some things that he would like to come out of those funds. We're having to do HVAC replacement and some items like that. But, you know, you can always appropriate new money if we spend those. I think it's 400, currently 400 in that fund. Or you could just make a motion to, you know, we can set up a separate line item in a different department, and you can appropriate new funds to it, so.
Would it be better to do that so all the, everything radio-related goes to
Would
that
be to that.
line item, or what do you think?
Yeah. We also have a fund that we set aside, you know, for projects like this. So we could actually set up a new department and line item and call it the radio feasibility study. And just, it's basically a transfer of funds into that
Is that from the,
operating reserve,
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, the savings account?
basically. Well, it's not the general fund.
Right.
You've already appropriated that money.
Question, what would you prefer?
I think we could go ahead and pay the invoice, and we could try the internal transfer first, and if at a later time we see that additional funding's needed, then we could come back and ask for general fund to be, you know, supplemented into that line item.
So you're saying you think we ought to go ahead and pay the $3,500 invoice?
And if you're authorizing staff to just set up a separate line item where we can expend those funds, and we can do a transfer, and then at the December meeting, you would just approve that.
What's the board's thoughts on that?
What she said.
We'll put the motion in place. Basically, you've appropriated the funds, we can pull it from a different department and set up a new line item.
And then that way you can track, whether it's over several budgets, how much the radio replacement system
Right.
cost overall.
So knowing that your preference is to leave the wireless funds alone, then you just want us to work within the current operating budget.
I mean, I don't know if that's my preference, I just, I know that money's probably gonna be needed at some point.
Okay.
Um,
We just
Whether we
need
spend it now or spend it later probably is irrelevant, I guess.
Okay.
So is there a motion to approve the invoice? And I guess the county administrator to set aside a line item for this?
I move that we pay the CTA invoice for $3,500 and that the county administrator set up a separate line item to keep track of these funds across the years.
Motion duly made, is that second?
Second.
Discussion? Have a roll call vote. Reverend Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Hinkle?
Aye.
Mr. Hogan?
Aye.
I also vote aye.
The beard.
Mr. Hips? Oh, me, you think I'd be learned by, I've learned something by now, don't you? Okay, committee appointments. Committee and board appointments for December. Attached for our review is a copy of the upcoming board appointments for the December 2022 meeting. Also attached is an email from Mr. Kinkle Robinson announcing he does not wish to serve another term on the Economic Development Authority. Now, it's in our booklet and then on our email. These appointments is coming up with an asterisk that's going to have to be done in December. And let's see, 3, 5, 6. I see 6, 8, 11, 12 of them.
Mr. Chairman, actually, there's gonna be one more because, Mr. Pickett, member of the Board of Zoning Appeals,
Yeah.
It's a
passed
vacancy.
away
Yeah.
in August.
That's right, exactly right.
Notate also that the Horizon Behavioral Health Board member is not an appointment of this board. I reached out to Horizon, and they had I guess it was like a community type of appointment where they could appoint someone. We were given 2 slots originally, and they dropped back to 1. So they appointed her internally.
Okay.
So who's the other one?
It was Terry Conrad.
Terry.
It was Terry. But I need to verify that
She
with
used to be
Sandy
on there.
Farmer.
Yeah.
So that one will not need to be,
Authorized by
Field.
the board.
Okay.
That's correct.
Now, have you heard anything from these others like Patrick Richardson and Jeff Garrett?
I talked to Mr. Rourke, and he said that he was pretty sure that Patrick Richardson had communicated he would like to serve again. Of course, Kinkle has passed in his resignation. The other 3 on the Board of Building Code Appeals, they had voiced that they would continue to serve if reappointed.
Uh-huh.
Jeff Garrett, I don't think we've reached out to him, so we would need to ask him as well.
Yeah.
The 2 Planning Commission, although Sarah Blackwell, she's got an asterisk, she's the town representative, so you won't need to, you'd only have to reappoint her term.
Let's see, that's under what?
That's under the Planning Commission, but then you've got Josh
Okay.
Mills and Al Sears, and Mr. Rourke's gonna reach out to them, both of them.
Okay.
Board of Zoning, the 3 with the asterisks, he feels pretty confident that they are willing to serve. Then you've got 2 vacancies on that.
Right. Oh,
so really that whole board needs to be redone.
sounds like it.
You got 3 expiring terms and 2 vacancies.
True. Yeah, and they are 5-year terms. The Board of Building Code's 3-year.
So Mr. Rourke, Darlene Reed is here, so you can get her tonight. Oh. There was something on here that I had a question about it. Oh, Joseph Sayer, now that's who? That's not the one just recently died, is it? Do you know who that is?
That was Jeff Sayer's father, so I don't know if this is Jeff's father.
Yeah, I know, yeah, Jeff's father, but I don't,
Who? Larry, okay. So
That's right,
not
Larry,
him.
yeah.
Okay.
okay,
So maybe
all right.
not-
Huh,
Maybe not then.
yes. All right, so we'll deal with this in December. After all of the yes and no's, everybody's been contacted. Next is our consent agenda. The consent agenda includes approval of all bills, minutes, supplemental appropriations, line item transfers, and fund transfers. Any item on the consent agenda shall be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member prior to the vote on the consent agenda. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be considered by the board individually in order in which they were removed from the consent agenda immediately following consideration of the consent agenda. So we have before us the consent agenda. Does anyone have any questions on any of these ones listed?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion duly made, is that second?
Second?
Been second? We have any discussion whatsoever? If not, have a roll call vote. Reverend Jones? Aye. Mr. Hinkle?
Aye.
Mr. Hogan?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Mr. Hips? I'm gonna have to get Mr. Hogan knock me in the head. Oh, me. Mr. Latchney.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Next is Mrs. Adams.
Yes,
Once,
sir.
twice, 3 times.
Everybody has a copy. You can review the report, and if there are any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
We'll take a minute to review.
Okay. Did your page 1 have a back?
Yes.
Okay. That's good.
Ms. Adams.
Yes,
you
sir.
would add that to me?
I certainly will, yes.
Ms. Adams, would you like to remind us about November 27th?
Sure, Mr. Carter. The Christmas tree lighting in Cortland Festival Park will take place on Sunday, November 27th, and we'll have special gospel music at 4:30, and the lighting will occur at 5 p.m. Then the following weekend is,
December 3rd.
yes, which would be
Saturday.
December the 3rd. We'll start out with the parade. We have the artisans in Cortland Festival Park, and there'll be Santa Claus and stews and food trucks and other activities occurring on the courthouse square, and it'll just be a day of fun for young and old alike. Everything's free.
All right. Any questions from any member in regards to?
Mr. Carter,
All right, Mr. Hinkle.
well, it's, Ms. Adams' report reminded me of it regarding GIS and that great mapping system. I was trying to do some research, and I could not find, other than when you had to go to the map in order to get the overlay of the supervisor districts. And I was wondering if in the property description part, it wouldn't be more convenient to have it listed in the property description to say which district they're in without having to go to the actual physical map and overlay the districts in order to find out if that property's in your district or not.
Mr. Rourke, would you like to address that?
That would actually be information we don't have because that property card, that information that you're seeing is pulled directly from the database that's in the commissioner's office. So it's just plugging in the data that's already there. That data that you're talking about doesn't exist on a property scale. So that would be something you'd have to create, and more than likely have to create it in the Commissioner of Revenue's office so that it could be maintained in that database.
Thank you.
That would be nice, though, wouldn't
I
it?
know, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, any other items for the county administrator? There was no items that was removed, so we don't have to worry about that. Next is reports and informational items consisting of school financial report, Robert E. Lee, Soil and Water Conservation District Board of Directors meeting minutes. And finally, we get to go to supervisor concerns. Reverend Jones.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hinkle.
Well, I certainly hope that in January, when we get a different election board, that the new board is more friendly to the poll workers and the public than the current electoral board is.
Amen.
I've had a lot of complaints about them, and even some poll workers are saying, we're not coming back if this is the way it's going to be.
Yes, sir. Mr. Hogan,
Nothing tonight.
I'd like to second, Mr. Hinkle's verbiage there. It's pitiful, it really is. So hopefully something can, be progressive next year. Do we have a closed session?
We do have a closed session. I would like to also extend sympathy to the family of one of our deputies who passed away recently, Deputy Hopkins. I don't know if you want to say something to that.
Well, I do know this. Let me back up just 1 second. And Mr. Hibbs, I done it again.
That's okay, I didn't have anything.
Okay, thank you. Well, on the passing of Roy Hopkins, he was a deputy for 30 years. Prior to that, I think he worked down at James Ford's farm. He was a well-liked individual. He looked out, he really did look out for the citizens of the county, and especially the youth. He was really engaged with the youth. He wouldn't go out and give a frivolous ticket, if you will. He tried to work with them, and he did work with them. So he leaves behind a wife and family, and we need to keep them in our prayers. I have forgotten the year that he retired, but he's been surely missed since then.
He's worked part-time in the courthouse.
Yeah, he did.
Continued to work.
Yeah. Oh, so,
If I could piggyback off of that, the
Yeah.
sheriff's office has had a lot of tragedy in the last couple of weeks. Just want,
Robbie.
Major Richardson and his wife were pregnant with twins and had some complications and had to have the babies early, 27, 28 weeks, which is really early. Unfortunately, one of the babies didn't make it. So the other baby is stable, is my understanding, but was going to require several months of hospitalization. So a lot of heartache over at the sheriff's office, and just want to let them know that we're thinking about and praying for them.
You know, I think it'd be real appropriate, Ms. Adams, if we sent the family of Roy Hopkins sympathy card, and also Major Richardson. If y'all think it's okay. And you said we do have a closed session.
Very briefly, I believe, yeah.
Very short, yes.
Okay, so upon saying that, next thing on our agenda is a closed session.
All right. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Appomattox County desires to discuss in closed meeting the following matter: consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel concerning Carver Price Museum. And whereas pursuant to Section 2.23711A8 of the Code of Virginia, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Appomattox County does hereby authorize discussion of the aforestated matters in closed session. Need that as a motion.
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
Motion made, is there a second?
Second?
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye.